This is Word on the Reef, where marine science meets adventure. Join Tanya Murphy and Brett Goodban as we plunge into the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef and explore the mysteries beneath the waves. Good morning and welcome to Word on the Reef. My name is Tanya Murphy and with me is my fellow aquanaut, Brett Goodban.
Morning everyone. Hope everyone had a great week.
Today we're going to be travelling to beautiful Lizard Island, or Jiguru as it's known to the traditional owners, the Dingal people. We visited Lizard Island last year back in Season 1, Episode 6 of the online Word on the Reef podcast, and back at that point it was in the grips of its worst ever coral bleaching event. So today we're heading back to meet the new directors of the research station and find out how everything's going 1 year on. So to get there, we just need to take a 1 hour scenic flight north of Cairns. With Rocky Mountains rising up from turquoise waters and white fringed beaches, this island is home to a luxury resort and also the Lizard Island Research Station. This facility was set up by the Australian Museum in 1973, which makes it 52 years old, and provides facilities for hundreds of scientists from all over the world to carry out reef research, resulting in the publication of more than 2,700 scientific papers over its history, completely revolutionising our understanding of coral reefs. Now, this research station is home to our guest today, Dr David Abrego, who recently took over the reins as co-director of the research station, along with Dr Emily Howells. Good morning, Dr Abrego. How are you?
Hi, Tanya and Brett. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us from Paradise all the way up there.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the show. So originally from Mexico, Dr Abrego met Dr Howells when studying marine biology at James Cook University in Townsville. They spent 5 years studying reefs on the Persian Gulf in the United Arab Emirates, and more recently, Dr Abrego has worked for the National Marine Science Centre at Southern Cross University and is a science lead for the Reef Restoration and Adaptation Program known as RRAP. Now, for those listening in live, don't forget to save the text line number on your phone now. It is our text line, so if throughout this interview you have any questions for us or Dr Abrego, please text us on 0437 835 937. That number again, 0437 835 937. Send us a text or just save the number for future reference in case any questions come into your head on any of our shows. Dr Abrego, for all those listeners who have never been to Lizard Island, paint a picture for us to help us imagine that we're there with you. What's it like?
Tanya, I think you've done a good job of starting to paint a picture of getting to the island. To get to the island, we're about 270 kilometers north of Cairns, in the middle of that section of the Great Barrier Reef. So you take a light plane and you essentially fly over all the mid-shelf reefs on your way to the island. So you have on the left side of the plane, you have beautiful lush greenery from North Queensland. Right below you, you have all the really colorful reefs in the mid-shelf. And then on the right side of the plane, you can actually see the outer reef. And so as you come into the island, you can see our smaller group of islands. We're bordered by 3 small islands on the south. So that's Palfrey and South Island and Bird Islet. And then you can see the lagoon within our home reef, so to speak, which is beautiful, is nice and very deep blue, and it changes as the water gets shallower. And then you come in and land, and then you get a really good appreciation of how surrounded by reefs this island really is.
Wow, it sounds beautiful. Even the flight up sounds incredible.
It is, and it never gets old. Every time I do it, it's I'm tired of doing it.
Wow, I totally am there now.
Yeah, me too. I drifted off for a second. I'm thinking, hang on a sec, I better come back.
So once we land, what's it like?
So once we land, one of the first things you'll probably notice is the lizards, which is what the island was named after. The island is actually quite green. It has its own aquifer in the island as well. And so it has a lot of different habitats. So you have Mount Cook on the northern side of the island where you can get a bit of height. You can actually get a really nice view from the top of Mount Cook. And you go through different vegetations to get to the top. Closer to the ground, as I said, it's more grasses. And what we're interested in is things below the water, which is what attracted us to the island itself. As I mentioned, we're surrounded by reefs of different sizes and different characteristics. So we have a couple of really nice reefs very close to the station that we have been monitoring for a while. But then we can also get around to the northern side of the island, and then we have another reef called McGillivray Reef, really close to the island, that provides us a little bit more depth and a different perspective for what mid-shelf reefs along this section of the Great Barrier Reef look like.
Wow, so it sounds like the perfect place to do all different kinds of research.
I've got a question this first. What's the predominant lizard species you've got there? Are they lace monitors? What are they?
Yes. Now you're calling me on this. I'm a
Sorry.
He's a marine ecologist, Brad.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm an everything. It's a creature, I want to know about it. Are they big?
Yes. They can get to about 1.5 meters on the tail.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there are enough of them around, which is nice to see. And then we've got other species of terrestrial reptiles as well, lots of skinks and geckos. The bird life is nice, lots of different types of sunbirds. We occasionally get some pheasants, and of course all the other marine birds.
So just in a nutshell, paradise then.
Coastal birds. Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Sounds like a nature lover's paradise.
Nice.
So for those people who have been listening to our online podcast since last year, you'll remember we visited Lizard Island in March last year and spoke with Dr. Anne Hoggett, who was the previous director of the research station, along with Dr. Lyle Vale. And they were in that role for 34 years. So it's not an opportunity that comes up very often. Dr. Abrego, what drew you and Dr. Howells to take on this role?
Oh, look, it was an opportunity of a lifetime. We had both been to Lizard Island as researchers in the past. We've been visiting Lizard Island for about 20 years now. And so we knew how special the place is. Again, going through our undergraduate and graduate studies, a lot of the papers we read originated in this place. So we knew how important it was in terms of facilitating really great science, great reef science. And again, having been here a few times, we knew how special and how beautiful it was. And knowing that Anne and Lyle had been here for 34 years, we knew it wasn't a job people walk away from. Again, when we saw this coming out, we had to apply because we knew that wasn't going to come up again in our working lifetimes.
How significant was Dr. Hoggett and Dr. Vale's 34-year contribution to the Lizard Island Research Centre, do you think?
Oh, enormous. I think it cannot be overstated. They were critical to the development of the station as a powerhouse of knowledge generation. And again, I think they got it. When they came here, they had a really nice vision of turning this place into somewhere where research could be facilitated. And so they made it as easy as possible for researchers from all over the world to come and carry out the research. So they had that very clear. And they worked really well with the Australian Museum. The Australian Museum was incredibly supportive, as well as with the Lizard Island Reef Research Foundation. And through their work with both of those institutions, they were able to build up the station into what it is today. And we were very lucky to inherit the station because we knew it was in very good shape. And again, the reputation of the station as a place to do reef science, it is one of the best places in the world to do that.
Yes, and sending out best wishes to Anne and Lyle in their next adventure. I understand it was a visit to Lizard Island in the year 1980 which inspired then Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser to nominate the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park for World Heritage listing. And the likes of Bill Gates and David Attenborough have also graced its shores. Dr. Abrego, of the more than 900 islands on the Great Barrier Reef, why do you think Lizard Island is so significant and special?
Yeah, look, its location certainly helps. Again, we're sandwiched between the coastline and the outer Great Barrier Reef, but we're not that far because the reef actually does get quite close to the coast on this section. Lizard Island is pretty much right in the middle, so we're half an hour from coastal reefs and about half an hour from outer shelf reefs. But importantly is the access, I believe, that having the access to the island and facilitating access to the reef has made an incredible difference to the people that come here, not just the researchers, but also the people that come and visit and see the reef, like Malcolm Fraser. I think it's no coincidence that the plans to set the Great Barrier Reef as a protected area happened right after he actually had a chance to come and have a look at the reef.
And Lizard Island's not that far from Osprey Reef and the Cod Hole and all of those outer northern reefs?
Yeah, so we're a bit far from Osprey Reef, but we are close to the Cod Hole. So the Cod Hole is about 40 minutes on one of our boats.
Yeah, right.
On a good day.
That's one of the most famous dive sites in the world,
I miss
think.
the Cod Hole. I did a lot of years with the old tacker that used to leave from Cairns on a Friday and do the shark trips up to Osprey Reef and the Cod Hole and Steve's Bommy. It's just paradise up there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a world-class dive site. So no, it's very nice. And again, we're very lucky to have it here about 40 minutes from where we are.
Oh, nice.
Yes, we're so lucky. And now I'm just feeling more and more like, why haven't I actually been there?
You've got to get up there.
Booking my flights now. See you later. Our guest today is Dr David Abrego, marine ecologist and co-director of Lizard Island Research Station. Now, as I mentioned, we visited Lizard Island back in Season 1, Episode 6 of the online Word on the Reef podcast in March last year. And at that time, the reef was in the grips of its worst bleaching event on record. And now we know that the northern and far northern sections of the Great Barrier Reef are once again experiencing bleaching. So, Dr Abrego, how are things looking on the reef at Lizard Island right now?
Yes, Tanya. So unfortunately, yes, we are seeing some bleaching again this year. It's not as severe as what we saw last year, but yes, unfortunately, we are seeing clear signs of bleaching, and some reefs are looking quite bleached at the moment, particularly mid-shelf reefs like Martin and Airy at the moment are looking really bleached, which is unfortunate because they also were quite affected last year, so whatever is left on those reefs is now bleached again. On the rest of the reefs around Lizard Island, more immediate vicinity, things are a bit patchy. So along the North Point, there's some bleaching. The reefs right across our station, so Vicky's Reef, for example, fortunately seem to have escaped the worst of the bleaching this year. So it is patchy, and as I said, not as bad as last year, but it is, again, happening this year, and it's something that we have been seeing for the last 6 years.
Yes, I understand this is the sixth bleaching in 6 years in that region.
Yes, unfortunately, that it is becoming an annual occurrence. So they haven't all been as devastating as last year. Even before last year, there was some bleaching around the reefs at Lizard Island. And yes, unfortunately, this is something that we're seeing occurring every year now around the reef, not just a one-off. And again, last year was particularly bad, but again, this is happening again this year, and it's a problem because corals need time to recover. They're very slow growing, so when they bleach and die, then it takes a long time for corals to recruit and grow and reestablish populations in affected reefs.
She needs a couple of years break, doesn't she?
Yeah, you need more than that.
Yeah.
Decades for some species.
4 to 5 years to get back to a really nice reef.
That's the difficulty as well, is if a lot of corals died in last year's bleaching event, then they wouldn't have had time to recover yet. So then you might not see as much bleaching this year, but it could also be because there's not as much there to bleach. Is that fair to say?
And this is exactly what is happening in reefs in the mid-shell. So the two reefs that I mentioned, Airy Reef and Martin, that's actually what is happening in those two reefs because they had such a devastating loss last year that it may not look as bad this year, but that's because there's not much left to bleach. But if those corals again are bleaching this year, then that has implication for how those reefs are going to recover.
Yeah, those few corals that actually managed to survive last year are bleaching again.
Yeah.
It's a tough time for them. And for any listeners that aren't aware, coral bleaching occurs when corals expel their colourful microalgae due to stress, which causes them to turn white or sometimes bright glowing fluorescent colours. And the primary cause of that stress at the moment is record high ocean temperatures. We know that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres of the United Nations has described us as being in the era of global boiling.
Oh, gee.
So what sort of sea surface temperatures have you been dealing with up at Lizard Island this summer, Dr. Abrego?
Yeah, so at the moment in the water, we're hovering at about 30 degrees, and this is pretty much been the case since the start of December.
And sorry, how much above average is that? Because some people probably think, 30 degrees doesn't sound too bad. That sounds like a nice temperature to go swimming in, but we know corals are very heat sensitive. Yeah. So for them, how much hotter than the average summer maximum is that 30 degrees?
This is about 1.5 degrees above the average summer maximum, which is a problem because we know that corals bleach when you get to about 1 degree above their average summer maximum. We're above that threshold at the moment, and we have been there since about December. Now, this doesn't mean that the temperature has been there the entire time, right? So there's, the temperature on the reef changes diurnally. We've had a couple of weeks where we had nice wet weather and a bit of cloud cover that has helped. And I do believe that the reason we're not seeing as bad a bleaching in all the reefs around Lizard Island at the moment is that we've had a couple of periods where that slightly cooler temperature and cloud cover helped the corals around here. But yes, we're still hovering well over 1 degree above their average maximum summer temperatures, which means that the corals are still stressed.
What's the forecast? Do you think that temperature will ease off and give those corals some chance for recovery soon?
Yeah, so fortunately we're coming into April now, and typically this is the time where temperatures start to decrease, so hopefully we'll see that. Again, we're hovering around 30 degrees still, but yeah, hopefully the temperature will decrease in the next few weeks so that the reefs that haven't yet bleached will actually have a chance to not bleach and to contribute to the recovery of neighboring reefs, hopefully.
And how did you find also with that volume of rainfall we had for Jasper and this year, how badly affected was lizard and the corals from the extra rain and the runoff?
Yeah, no, it didn't really affect the corals that much. Again, a lot of the rain just washes off the island, really, and once it gets to ocean water, it gets quickly diluted. So the effect of all that water is not as bad because we haven't got major rivers contributing to runoff here. So this year we haven't seen any impacts of that. I think the effects of that are a lot more evident on Central Coast reefs.
Right, that's
places
good.
like Orpheus Island and the Palm Island group. I think they've been a lot more affected because they've had a lot of rain in that region.
For those listeners who might not be aware, what is causing the increased frequency and severity of these marine heat waves?
Yeah, look, there's no question. It's man-made climate change. It's our reliance on fossil fuels, and all the fossil fuels we're burning and we're pumping into the atmosphere that is leading to a heating of our atmosphere. Chief among them is CO2, but there are others. And
Methane.
again, there is no question that is the biggest contributor to the increase in ocean temperature is the increase in our air temperature. And again, our reliance on fossil fuels. So we need to get serious about that.
Some people may think that climate change is still a problem that will affect us far off in the future, but you just previously mentioned that coral bleaching was predicted to become annual by mid-century, but it's actually become annual, at least in your section of the reef. It's already annual. How concerning is it to see it happening annually already?
It's very concerning. Again, this is not where we should be at this point. And again, the fact that we've been seeing it for 6 years in a row now, it's something that is very worrying. Corals need a bit of time to recover. If you have a coral that suffers a mass bleaching event, the corals that don't die, the corals that survive, they've actually spent a lot of energy just staying alive. Okay, so those corals need to recover their symbionts. They need to replenish their energy supply. So corals that bleach in 1 year, they have an actual reduced reproductive output that year. So the survivors are in a weakened state, which makes them more vulnerable to coral disease, makes them less productive in terms of being able to make babies that year. So it takes, it takes some time to recover. So not only is the bleaching affecting corals in the summer, but it also affecting corals in the future because it's impacting the capacity of the surviving corals to contribute to the next generation.
That was actually going to be my next question, because are you guys doing a lot of studies on the coral spawning? How have you found that this year and the year before?
So we weren't here last year, so I can tell you what was communicated to us from the previous directors. The spawning last year was actually really good because it happened just before corals began to bleach. So corals spawn in Lizard Island around the November full moon. And so last year it was a very good spawning.
That's a relief. Yeah. At least there's some good news
I
today.
know, that's nice.
Yeah, and we have people that come to do a lot of research on spawning, and they have set tiles out on the reef. They have been here recently to monitor the survival on the tiles that they've settled with baby corals from the previous spawning. And from what they communicated with us, of course, they're still working on the reports, they had decent survival.
Oh, good.
So that's always good to see. And again, when I mentioned that the reefs have bleached for 6 years in a row, it's patchy where it occurs. But one thing that we are always on the lookout for is, are we getting survival? Are we still getting recruitment to these reefs? Are we still getting some of those juveniles remaining on these reefs? Because those are the ones that are going to help recover the reefs.
Yeah.
That is the positive side to this. We know different coral species in different areas of the reef are impacted differently by bleaching, which is important to tell everyone, depending on factors like depth, currents, species, and so on. Case in point, I went fun diving on my birthday last weekend.
Yes.
And had an absolutely breathtaking dive, because although there was significant bleaching that I saw on the shallow reef flats in the shallower than 5 metres, there was still thriving coral at depth. So I think never has there been a more important time to get your scuba diving licence if you want to continue seeing healthy coral. So we know that there are still survivors out there that can be our hope for the future. But Dr. Abrego, you and Dr. Howes, having a combined 27 years of experience working on coral reefs, how does it feel to see the reefs that you love and have spent so much time on bleaching in front of your eyes?
Yeah, look, Tanya, it's hard. It's really hard at times. So we do get attached. We care deeply about the reefs. This is one of the reasons we took the job. So it is hard to see them, and this is one of the reasons why we are very serious about facilitating research that can help us understand how they can recover, what sort of help can we provide to the reefs. Again, Emily and I have been working on reefs for, between us, we've got 27 years of experience focusing on corals, but looking at different aspects of how they adapt. For example, Emily works on questions with adaptation to climate change. I work on questions about the symbiosis between corals and the microalgae that they lose when they bleach, and looking at how different associations can help those corals. But again, we're very serious about supporting the researchers that come out here, particularly for long-term studies, and help us to understand how reefs recover after those bleaching events. We know that they can recover if we give them the chance and if we give them the time.
Yeah.
And we know that bleaching is patchy. So, can some of the corals that don't bleach help the other corals recover?
Yes, the antidote to despair is action, and you guys are definitely embodying that, and there are things that all of us can do. Getting involved in actions to help protect any environment gives you a lot of hope when you see how many people are out there, whether it's through science or just community actions. It can definitely give us a lot of hope. Now, Brett and I work with a lot of tourists, and when people find out that this is happening to the reef, often their understandable first reaction is, please tell me it's not true.
Yeah.
Is it possible that this is all just part of a natural cycle? What do you think, Dr. Abrego?
Yeah, it's not. It's not a natural cycle. We know that corals haven't bleached on a yearly basis, naturally. Again, back in the 1980s, when scientists started looking at these mass bleaching events, they indeed didn't occur so often. But again, we are starting to see that frequency of bleaching events getting higher and higher. And again, the severity of these bleaching events is also getting higher. And we know that this is not a natural cycle. This is, again, directly linked to
it's actually a question that I've been
the atmosphere.
Asked a few times.
And I want to say we do get really sad about it.
Yeah.
But again, it's really important to take action. So we're very serious about encouraging that research that happens here in the island and communicating that to other stakeholders. So we have people from the resort that come to the resort as guests, and they take tours here. So we're always happy to talk to them about our reefs. And again, as you said, it's important for people to get out there and see the systems, because then once you realize how beautiful these systems are and how productive and how important they are economically as well to Australia, then people will care for them more.
And I think that's the connection that people are going to be getting from our shows, your podcast. It's more to us because the reef is our life, and those in the industry have that really personal connection with it. So it is difficult to see you going through this.
Yeah, last week we had Dr. Yolanda Waters from Divers for Climate. We spent a lot of time talking about the importance of the tourism industry. Resorts like Lizard Island, they changed the future of the reef because Malcolm Fraser went for an introductory dive on the reef, and that inspired him to take action to protect it. And it's the same with myself and Brett. You visit as a tourist, you get to fall in love with it, and then you go out and feel inspired to do things to protect it. So what you're mentioning, Dr. Abrego, about what tourists can learn by visiting a place like Lizard Island and then checking out the research station. The work that you're doing there, communicating with tourists and the rest of the world, coming on the radio, talking to us, it's so vital. And Lizard Island is 100% on my bucket list. So bleaching or no bleaching, I'll definitely be heading up there to see all the wonders that it has. Now, back to talking about what's happening with the bleaching, there has been a bit of fanfare about how quickly corals can regrow or have regrown after past stress events, especially like after cyclones. Corals were seen growing back quite fast, but I understand that regrowth has been dominated by a small number of species.
Yeah, particularly in reefs that have been bleached every year. Yes, you do see a change in the coral communities. Different corals grow at different rates, and different corals have different susceptibilities to bleaching. Okay, so what happens when you have these year-on-year bleaching events is that, yes, you change the communities, and those reefs no longer look the same. So that does happen in some reefs around here.
Yeah, so even though some areas have had high coral cover regrowing after disturbances, we've seen that this is dominated by the fast-growing weedy species, as they call them.
Acroporas,
Yeah, the sort of branching corals, which is, I sort of describe it when tourists ask me about it as losing an old growth rainforest full of trees that are hundreds of years old and then seeing grass grow back. Yes, it grows back very quickly, but it's not the same as the diversity that was there before. Do you think that's a decent analogy, Dr. Abrego?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit different with reefs because, unfortunately, the fast-growing species are also the most susceptible to bleaching.
Yeah, that's right.
So fast-growing species are really important for providing a lot of diversity in structure. So they provide a lot of structural complexity to reefs. So when you lose a fast-growing species, you lose a lot of that complexity in structure. And again, being the most sensitive to bleaching, these are usually the first ones to go. Now, here in reefs in Lizard Island, we've had some reefs which were devastated in the bleaching event of 2016, 2017. They were dominated by Acropora corals, so these are the branching species, the fast growers, the structural complexity builders. They were lost, essentially. A lot of them died after the 2016-17 bleaching event. By 2020, many of them had come back, and again, up to 2024, that was probably the peak where this particular reef that I'm thinking about was at its peak in terms of coral cover, beautiful tables everywhere. But then it bleached last year, and so we're back to square one. So that reef took about 5 years to recover. And again, the issue is not whether coral reefs can recover. They absolutely can recover. It's just that we need to give them time in between those disturbances so that they can recover. And having back-to-back bleaching events doesn't help with that.
No.
So the positive takeaway for everyone is not to give up. It's not too late to help save coral reefs because we still have the survivors, the resilient ones out there. But time is running out. If those corals continue with annual bleaching, it's going to get harder and harder for them to survive. So what do we as a society need to do to stop these marine heat waves and save coral reefs, Dr. Abrego?
Yeah, look, the things you can do to save coral reefs are the same things you can do to save your homes from future disasters. We just need to get climate change under control. Again, if you're not in research, then that's fine. You can contribute with your lifestyle choices, and you can reevaluate how you drive or how you consume your products, where your products are coming from. So all of that has an impact on our individual carbon footprints. We have a big job to do on the 3rd of May, so how you vote, who you elect to office.
Absolutely.
That has a huge impact. Okay, so there's a number of levels on which everyone can act. Again, your personal choices on your carbon footprint, your decisions on who you are supporting in terms of who makes the decisions and the policy making, those are all things that everyone can do. So you don't need to be a researcher and come to Lizard Island to do that and to have that impact. In fact, arguably, most of the people that will have the biggest impact will never set foot on Lizard Island.
Yeah, we find that with our guests as well at work because we get people from all over the world, and every day they're asking us, what can I do? How can I help? And you just say, just as you said, it all starts at home. We can all chip in to make a difference. But a lot of people arrive at our facility and they just feel a bit overwhelmed and they go, it's gone too far, we can't do anything. But we can. We just all need to chip in.
Yeah, and again, just examining, your individual carbon footprint, because there are many things that you may be able to do. And again, how you consume, what sort of products you consume, how much do you drive, do you need to drive everywhere, things like that really do make an impact.
Yeah, and joining communities is what magnifies your impact from just individual to, hundreds or thousands of other people that are part of a climate action organisation. It can supercharge your impact just beyond the individual, but it starts with you getting involved in that. And we can impact the system. Australia is the second largest exporter of coal in the world and one of the highest per capita carbon emitters in the world. Some of it does come from us driving our cars, but the largest slice of that pie comes from electricity generation, which means we have the power to make a big difference on global climate change, because Australia is already 43% powered by renewables currently. So we've been doing really well in that transition. And we're tracking towards 82% renewable by 2030. But that progress is on the line with the upcoming federal election on the 3rd of May, like you said. That's going to be a critical election because decisions made in the next term of government in the next 3 years will determine the reef's future, because time is running out. So we haven't got time to wait another 3 years or however many years to give the reef a bit of a break. So I encourage all listeners to find out where your local candidates stand on climate action and renewable energy, and voting with climate action in mind is probably the most impactful action at the moment that anyone can do in the next few weeks to help protect the reef. There's a lot of things you can do at any time of the election cycle, but at the moment, I would say...
So it's a shame our coral babies can't vote, isn't it?
Well, just think...
Can you go out to the corals at Lizard and just give them all a ballot paper for us? And we'll get this one over the line, mate.
Yeah. Well, if they could, can you imagine? So let's all go to the polls thinking, what would the reef do?
That's right. Imagine that. What would the reef vote for to save her? Yeah.
Yeah, and on the sustainability note, Tanya, I'd like to say, the station runs on all of our electricity needs. We're at about 96% solar, so we have the capacity, we have the technology, and I think, the Australian people know it. We're the biggest uptake in solar domestically, so we have the capacity to generate a lot of our needs here far more sustainably than we currently do. Again, at the station, we're about 96% solar, and we run dive compressors. We have lots of chest freezers for our equipment. Some of our labs need to be air conditioned all the time. So our consumption is not small, but we're able to meet a lot of that through solar. So again, the technology is there.
Yeah. Well, that's a good example. If Lizard Island can be 96% renewable, why isn't...
What's our excuse?
Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and,
right.
After the initial installation, which ideally the government should be helping people with, it saves you money because everyone knows that petrol prices are through the roof. Dr. Abrego, you spent 5 years studying reefs on the Persian Gulf in the United Arab Emirates. Did you learn something there which can be applied here on the Great Barrier Reef?
Yeah, well, we learned a lot of things. One of the things that attracted us to the Persian Gulf was the fact that corals live in that environment. There are small reefs that occur along the Persian Gulf, and the waters in the Persian Gulf during the summer can get up to 36 degrees. So,
wow.
A bit of a crystal ball for us in terms of telling, being able to see how corals are able to cope with such temperatures, because, that's where we're heading in other places. So that gave us an opportunity to go and study those corals and see what they were doing in terms of being able to withstand those very extreme temperatures. Again, summer times can get up to 36 degrees.
Wow.
In winter, it can get up, down to about 12 degrees. So quite a big range.
Wow.
Okay, and what we found is that even though they have been locally adapted for living under those conditions, that adaptation has taken a long time, and they're already at their limit. Okay, so they still bleach. Okay, so even though they bleach at a much higher temperature, they still bleach when the water gets above their mean maximum averages. Okay, so even those corals, which are viewed by many researchers as supercorals, they still bleach and they still die, and they're still very susceptible to other things like coral disease.
And that's the message, isn't it? Also, just because they can tolerate that high temperature, it doesn't make them immune to it becoming too hot for them to bleach. They still have that issue.
Yeah, so they're locally adapted to their conditions, but they're still stressing with the rapid changes in temperature because the water in the Persian Gulf is also getting hotter.
Didn't they nicknamed it the jacuzzi or something, the Gulf of Mexico?
It's hotter than bath water.
Yeah.
When we were
Oh,
diving
Persian.
there, we often had to take a camelback, so we'd have water to drink while we were
stop
diving.
it. Really? Wow.
The other thing we learned is that some of that thermal tolerance from the parents can actually be readily transmitted to the next generation. So it is possible to breed thermal tolerance into corals, and we did a study that showed that. So we took corals from the Persian Gulf, and we bred them from parents from outside the Persian Gulf, and the offspring of those corals were as thermally tolerant as if both of the parents had originated in the Persian Gulf. So that told us that thermal tolerance is readily inheritable. But again, that will only give them a helping hand. Again, corals in the Persian Gulf still bleach.
And also, we can't just bring a whole bunch of Persian species of corals over and just plant them on the Great Barrier Reef. It sounds like the cane toads, anyone? Introducing foreign species?
Yeah, they couldn't catch the cane toad beetle.
With that in Australia, right? So this is absolutely not what we want to do. But what that told us is, again, knowing that thermal tolerance is readily inheritable, then we can come and look for those tough individuals in our local reefs, right? And identify the areas that have those individuals and put the protection effort into those reefs as well, and then maybe use those individuals to help repopulate their local reefs. So again, we're not talking about bringing corals from the Persian Gulf, but learning that thermal tolerance is readily heritable was nice to see that, it can be passed on to the very next generation.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Absolutely amazing work that you're doing, and it's going to be interesting to hopefully talk to you, either you or Dr. Howells, in future to dive more deeply into that adaptation research that you're doing. But sadly, we don't have much time left today. So
an hour's gone quick again.
Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing visiting Lizard Island with you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.
It's been a pleasure, yes.
And thank you for all the incredible work.
Passing the message about protecting our reefs, because you protect the reefs, you protect everything else as well.
That's right. If we protect the Great Barrier Reef, we protect ourselves. That's a message we got from one of the traditional owners that I interviewed last year.
Very wise people.
Dr. David Abrego, marine ecologist and co-director of Lizard Island Research Station. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, mate. Have a great day.
You too.
And thanks to you, all our listeners, for joining us on Word on the Reef. I'm Tanya Murphy. My co-host is Brett Goodban. Next week, we'll be taking you on a journey to the other side of Australia, to Western Australia, to Ningaloo Reef.
Wow, that's going to be amazing.
So be sure to tune in to Cairns FM 89.1 to listen to the show live at 10 a.m. Queensland time every Friday, and text in your questions. You can also find the recordings available online after every show. Just search for Word on the Reef on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at instagram.com/Word on the Reef podcast. That's all for this week.
Thanks, everybody. Have
Thanks,
a wonderful
everyone.
week.
Best fishes. See you next time.
Bye.